Welcome back to the Liberating Generations podcast, everyone. I'm Dr. Keesha Ewers, and this is my amazing daughter, Reagan Claire. In this episode, we're going to explore the relationship between generational and personal trauma and the toxic burden your body carries and how this impacts your aging process and skin health. So, our guest is Brian Vaszily, who for 20 years has been immersed in natural health and personal development research. He's worked closely with many top doctors, researchers, and natural health organizations, helping many to become household names.
Dr. Vaszily, I would love if you could share your personal story of intergenerational trauma and if that is what led you to the work that you now do today.
I'm 52 right now. And you can kind of cut my life at this point down the middle. And the first half was rather rough. There's no other way to state that. There's a lot of good in there too, so don't get me wrong. I grew up inner city Chicago, somewhat rough neighborhood, lost friends to gangs, flirted with being in gangs myself. They almost recruited me, let me put it that way. And, various other rough circumstances out in the streets. But of most impact in a negative sense, I guess we'll say back then, my old father, he was a really, as it turns out, good man. But around my age of just 9 years old, he turned severely alcoholic and very much not a good man. He was quite abusive to me, to my sister, to my mother, and that persisted for years. And so I grew up in that type of domain, that type of household. We might dip deeper into this as well, but there were a handful of things that, helped me through, including powerful women, including an angel, frankly, for a mother. I know a lot of people might say that, but truly, I mean, what she endured and how she held us up and actually, taught us to thrive in the midst of all that. So truly a miracle. It was quite rough, during that period. As I became a very young man, myself, to my father's credit, he did kick the bottle. He quit that habit. But the real story is not really ever, the substances that people may take to. The real story is why did they, in the layman's term, self-medicate? And I got bits and pieces of his life as life went on in those early years. And then I learned a lot more thereafter because I needed to, and we can visit all that as well if you need to. But his life story read like a novel that you wouldn't believe. So in short, I'll just give you a few of there was good also, by the way, in his life. I know that, but, from a young age, he was abused by an aunt where he grew up a part of his life in Hungary. He was born in Brooklyn, had, rough time in the streets there, where was sent back to live in Hungary. He was abused, by an aunt there. He came back to the United States. He became a soldier in World War II. So he's from what they call the greatest generation, right? And he elevated to the level of a spy for the US. And then he fell in love with a woman there, who turned out to be Russian and little deeper in, she turned out to be a spy for Russia. And so he was a spy for you. She was a spy for, fell in love. When the war was going to be over, they were going to go get married. And then one day she was disappeared and he never heard a thing again. So this woman that he loved dearly at that age was gone. That's fast forward in his life. He did get married to a woman. Apparently, they got into an argument. When he was a young man, she stepped out of the vehicle while they were arguing. He watched as a truck barreled into her and killed her. Then he was in the marriage before my mom, who he was married to for the last 25 years of his life. He had two sons, and he lost one of them. He was 13 years old, this boy, my half brother I never met, and was hit by a car on his bike and killed. So he had a lot of trauma, clearly, and I just gave you some of the highlights only, but he didn't deal with it. In those days, we are very gifted. We don't realize how gifted we are to be at where we are today and much greater embrace of dealing with, even far less challenging challenges than that. Well, back in that day, you only went to a psychiatrist or psychologist if you were considered crazy. There was a stigma against
Right.
it. So he really didn't do anything about it. Well, what he did about it was internalize it, hold it all in, suffered severe health issues, hit the bottom, took it out on us. The you know the trauma could have continued. So at a young, so he kicked the habit. He was unfortunately, in and out of hospitals then for the last 10 years of his life. I really got to know a whole lot more about the medical system at a pretty darn young age than I ever wanted to, which is also what led me down this path. I saw it from the inside. Frankly, not going to mince words, how inept it really was. Again, if it wasn't for the saint of a mother who still loved that man dearly, uh, you know, he would have suffered a whole lot more than he did, even because we had to become experts in medical care. He dealt with a number of different diseases. Long story short, though, the last 6 years of his life, he was in his hospital straight the whole time, and we were there half the time with him. He suffered immensely. And then, he died. And then I had a run, we were dirt poor, as it was. Well, I became a young father myself, and yeah, good woman at the time. I got married way too young, to a woman who's now an ex-wife a long time ago. There was some determination in me, again, some good guidance by powerful women in my life, my mother, my sister, my older sister, certain wonderful teachers I had in those years who went way above and beyond, in terms of teaching me a lot of other things, including resilience, frankly. I could pause in the story here because there's certainly more to it about what led, to where I'm at today, but it has everything to do with those things. I even suffered, or, in that first 25 years of life, my wife at the time and I went to school full time, college. While being parents full time and working full time, there were periods there where, I had, for example, to sell a CD collection to keep our lights on one month. We had only a mattress on a floor for a while in a small studio apartment in Chicago where I was visited regularly at night by mice in my face. It was tough years, um, but I had been gifted with lessons of self-worth and resilience, which helped me through. Nonetheless, I'll add this one and then I'll pause. I did have a lot of mystery symptoms, especially gut related. And it wasn't until I went and did the deep work of forgiveness and that, I went through all kinds of tests. They couldn't quite figure out what was wrong with me. Well, I went through a lot of years of work for all that, of ultimately completely 100% forgiving and now even understanding. It doesn't, pardon, what was done, but I do have understanding of what was behind it. And when I really felt that forgiveness deep in my heart, these severe and some, for a while there, mystery symptoms hitting my gut part disappeared. So I'll pause there. That's the story in brief.
Brian, I appreciate you sharing your story,
Mhm.
and being vulnerable and authentic with that. The word forgiveness has been a theme in this podcast.
Mhm.
Because, as we talk about trauma and the downstream ramifications of chronic illness and addiction and mood disorders and, genetic expression into disease states, like all of these things, including shortened longevity, right? The adverse childhood experiences study says if you have an ACEs score of 6 or more, then you're programmed to live 20 years less than your compatriots that don't have an ACEs score of 6 or more. So we know that this does shorten our life in a whole bunch of different ways that we could dive into. But the thing that is so beautiful about it is that that's not a set in stone formula that I just rattled off right there,
Mhm.
that we can change it. And it's nice to know, like, oh, so here's where we're starting, and then we can say, so I kind of got to get serious about this. And here's this amazing intervention that I can implement that is, if done really well in the right order and not just what I call pulpit forgiveness,
Mhm.
then you actually can shift all those biological brain architectural biochemical changes that happen in your body as a result of trauma in your childhood. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Listen, I won't go deep in biology. How's it pronounced? The cytokine storm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sympathetic and parasympathetic nerve. And already today, even without trauma, we have enough challenge to try to live in a parasympathetic state mostly. What that means is, cytokines are basically a process in your immune system, right? And you may have already explained this, so I'll go real brief on this if you haven't. This might be helpful for people. It's really a key culprit behind all disease and early death today. And by the way, even looking older, that's a concern for people. Then you ought to look. Almost any perceived negative that we have, and certainly when you have diseases are not perceived negatives, they are, can be traced largely today to the fact that we have far too many cells who are out there trying to quell stress. And when you have this trauma, you can do anything else you want above that. But if you don't address that, you're not addressing the source. And those are constantly going to be at work. Your sympathetic system's going to mostly be in control instead of your parasympathetic. The sympathetic is the fight or flight mode. The parasympathetic is what we mostly want to live in, which is calm, cool and collected. So you've got to address the trauma. And in many cases, for many people, many women have had sexual offenses committed against them to one respect or another. For one example, there have been people in anyone else's life who, minor or major, however you may term it, have slighted us or had some great offense against us. A lot of people still, certainly from older generations, one great thing I see about younger generations is they're not taking it like older generations may have been taught to. They're facing, these things more head on, in my view, from what I've seen than earlier generations did. But the older generations are fast becoming conscious of it and really embracing it, which is a wonderful thing. But facing these head on, whatever the slights, the offenses were against you, this is often repeated, but it's true. When you don't forgive others, it doesn't harm them, it harms you in a big way. And forgiveness never has to mean, it's not the same thing at all as absolving people of what they did and saying that wasn't wrong. It was wrong. It was incredibly wrong what he did.
It's not condoning, it's not reconciling.
Right. But through my experience, I did find, when I really embraced that, that what, this is clearly harming me. This is harming me in physical health. This is harming me in my ability, to succeed at whatever it is I want to do. It's just harming me. I've got to face this one down, and it wasn't easy at first. It never is, of course. Perhaps the greater the offense, the more work that needs to be done on it. But I did find there was this moment, it's almost like this epiphany of like, wait a minute, and again, I'm not downgrading what was said and done. However, there was this moment where it's just like, holy cow, all this man was human. And there was this understanding all of a sudden, and I knew, by the way, in my case, it was I saw, he said it on his deathbed to me finally, that he loved me. And I knew that. I had seen it at a younger age, and I'd seen what these chemicals that, those toxins that he took to in terms of excess alcohol. So I knew that base was there somewhere. Some people don't even have that, and still you can forgive. But I knew that was there. And so in my case, I'm like, well, I just need to go deeper into understanding how someone can turn in this fashion. And I had some understanding of the story. And I had conversations with, certainly my mother and others that, had known my father. And there's still a lot of gaps, but I pieced together. I'm like, holy cow, now I could tell you, if we had 2 hours, I would tell you his whole story. Like I said, it wouldn't even be believable in a book, but I'm like, wow, that makes sense. That makes sense. In his case, it turns out it was carried generationally back. I told you his aunt abused him. Well, I knew a bit enough about the family history of his aunt, for example, to say, wait a minute, that was carried further back and further. Again, I'm going to assume that this is a chain that goes way back in time. And so there came a moment where I'm like, nope, it stops. I'm breaking this chain now. I will not, let past trauma, including trauma that, inflicted on me, I will not let that impact me the rest of my life, nor will I let it impact my children, my own wife, now anything. And it was just a deciding factor. And of course, there's little slips along the way. I'm human. Making that decision that, cliche but true, the buck stops here. And I will not bring that in, like multi-generation conflict forward. Nope. Got enough to deal with in this world, positives and negatives here. And I did the work. And I'm telling you, I mean, honestly, it healed. It healed me physically and in an emotional, mental sense as well.
Yeah, I think it's having that conversation, right? Like having that conversation with this current generation. That's where it stops. It's like bringing awareness to the traumas that came before you that really weren't even your own, that were then perpetuated, that you then saw, and then you have a decision. Then you have a choice of, okay, yeah, does it stop here, or do I just continue what has been shown to me? And I think with this topic of forgiveness, I think oftentimes we want so desperately to just be able to forgive. Snap of a finger, just say, yep, all is forgiven, and then move on. And it's not linear. It doesn't work like that. You can do so much forgiveness work and you might feel completely healed from an experience. You might not feel anger anymore, but then one day something might trigger you and all of a sudden you start to feel that familiar feeling of anger come up in your system. So it's not, in my experience, it's not necessarily a matter of, okay, all is forgiven. It's a matter of, okay, when those triggers come up, how do I process and move through them rather than letting them consume, like maybe a younger version of myself would have done? How do I move through it now with the tools that I have now, with the healing that I have done now, with where I'm at now in my development? So I have a question for you, Brian. You said it stops here, it stops with me. So how are you personally preventing the spread with your children?
That's a great question, first of all. And certainly there is a deciding point, and you can help that deciding point by doing whatever it is that reminds you that you made that choice, that decision, that it stops. And, in my case, I'm, one of the many things I am, but one that I'm mostly is a writer, for example. And I wrote it down, and I wrote this down in many different iterations, many different ways that I'm committing. Back then, again, I was a young father. My oldest son, he's a grown, wonderful best friend of mine, young man, 32 now, doing great. And then I've got as young as at home now, 9, 10, 17, and 32, right? I had that in front of my face. And that's also a gift in order to have to see children. I'm like, I'm not going to do this to them. I mean, it's a reminder unto itself. Not everyone has children. There are other ways, because you still may have other loved ones that you don't want to do harm to because of things that you have not worked through. And certainly yourself when you look in the mirror. So in my case, it's writing it down and just seeing every day. Whenever I look at my children, I'm going to remind myself, I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm on this committed path not to let this chain of trauma go any further than this. And again, to your point, it's, there's no perfection. I've been on the other side of the chair and I interviewing someone who I know had worked through their own trauma tremendously. Nonetheless, they broke down and cried. And that is not a sign that that they didn't work through their trauma. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with sadness. I mean, we have this notion in some quarters of society that sadness is bad and anger is bad. No, it's not. It's just if you have maintenance over it versus it owning you is really the bottom line. And I even I recall some audience members, he's not over it. He didn't get past. Oh, yes, he did. I could feel it. And he's lived his life. I still cry, occasionally when I bring up bits and pieces of my own, story with that, because it's okay to cry. It's okay to feel sadness, for what happened. That doesn't mean you haven't done the work and forgiven. So it really is a point where you just say, I commit to this thing, and give yourself every reason, full awareness. I advocate writing things down because it really works for me and many people, but it doesn't necessarily work for everyone. But make that commitment out loud, to yourself, to others, to the people that you trust, to the world, that you're going to make that change. It's a work in progress. People that I have interviewed, um, who I know they state they are, I believe them, and I can feel have done the work of forgiveness. They get emotional still. They cry about things, traumatic things that had happened to them that they have done forgiveness work for. You know, to your point, Reagan, they feel anger still sometimes. I mean, there's nothing wrong with these emotions. They're human emotions. The real question is, do you have control over those emotions, or do they have control over you still? That's
Ding,
kind of
ding, ding, ding.
right.
Yeah, I
That's
want to
the
highlight that and kind of put a
Sure.
pin in it right
Yeah,
there. Right.
that's there you go. That's the dividing line. And
Yeah.
interestingly, so in one interview, he was shedding some tears, but I know he had done that work, and was past it controlling his life, but it's still okay to cry. And some audience members, a couple said, aha, he didn't do the work. He's not past it. And I was a little bothered by that, because I'm like, no, 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 no. I still cry about certain things that happened to me way back when regarding my father and other things, but they're not in charge of me. Tears or anger, again, as long as you have that control over them, and you're aware of them, kind of watching as third person when, maybe later on, there it is. And that's okay. It was a
An
sad
engaged observer's mind that is
thing.
awake all the time with awareness of what your thought process is, so that you're not just believing every thought you have in your mind as some kind of treasure, right?
Ding, 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 back to you. Ding,
Yeah.
ding. Well, that's a great statement. And
Just because you have the thought doesn't mean it's a pearl of wisdom, everyone.
and that is the truth. But bottom line is, it's so important to decide that. I need to get past this thing so it doesn't own me and my health, and ruin my health, and ruin my relationships, or harm them, at least, whether they're with children, spouses, anybody you care about. Decide, put it out there. And in my case, I like putting it out there. And a lot of people do, in writing, to yourself, to others if you choose. Others put it out there to, the handful of people that then they really trust. And revisit that. Don't expect perfection. The old fall off the horse sometimes, on that path, on the journey. And it's never done, by the way. I can honestly say it's mostly done. There comes a point where it's mostly done, but you will still stumble back into, oh my goodness, like you said, watching from, the third person perspective. Wow, I moved in anger there. I did this in anger there. So, but it does get clearer and clearer, and the weight just comes off and off and off, and it really impacts your physical health too. It's so key to make that commitment and just keep striving to work. I went through different types of counseling with, some don't work. And this is another thing. I never want people to give up. If they need to step outside, whatever modality you may be interested in, and different modalities work for different people. And I try
Different therapists work for different people.
right. That's
Yeah.
exactly what I was just going to say.
Yeah.
If the first one doesn't work, and the first modality or the first individual therapist, keep going. You'll find it, and I learned that the hard way, because a couple times I gave up. And then I got, fortunately, through a little bit of homework and a little bit of, good old fashioned luck, I'm sure, that connected with, a couple of
Yeah.
very people in that regard, and it works. But yeah, we could talk diet all day. We could talk exercise. We could talk all these things. But if you don't tackle this first,
Mhm.
it makes the most pronounced and amazing shift in you. Not easy, but it's so worth it.
Mhm. It's one of the things that I'll talk to people about from stages is, when you're shopping for a therapist, it's important that you think of it that way. Like, that if you decide that you want a new pair of shoes, maybe like some green boots, right? And you go into a store that sells shoes and you try on some green boots that they have there, maybe 5 different styles. And you walk down the little, aisle and look at them in the mirror and feel, oh, can I walk in those all day? I don't know. If none of them work, you don't leave the shoes you walked in the store with on the shelf too and walk out the door and say, shoes just don't work for me, right?
Right.
You keep going and you wear your shoes out in the store, like shoes do work. And so
Yes.
it's important that you keep your ideas about like therapy
Mhm.
is not one size fits all. Talk therapy does not work. You can just do that with your friends. That you really want to talk to the part of your brain and your mind, which are separate, that was wounded. So if you're sitting doing talk therapy with somebody right now, you and I and Reagan are engaging from our adult brain, and we can talk all day about this. But if you're triggered, you're in a whole different part of your brain.
Mhm.
And so that one sometimes doesn't have access to that adult brain. And that's what you're learning how to do is create that bridge, so that you can go back and get that little one and say, oh, no, no, this isn't that. It's okay. I've got you. You don't have to deal with this. I'm doing it. Right. And I think that's really important for everyone to really understand that this is a process. And I agree with you. It is not done even when you die because you have all these. I mean, I remember sitting in therapy one time and saying, ah, I keep going back. It was hypnotherapy. I keep going back to the same place. This is never going to be healed, And my therapist looking at me and saying, "Oh, sweet." It was kind of like, "Oh, grasshopper," you know. And oh, grasshopper. Like you are going to be mining that same shaft for the rest of your life and bringing up the diamonds, the gems, the gold of wisdom from that place. This is not bad that you keep going down into that place. And I just remember thinking, oh, that's a different perspective than I had on this, right? I thought I was doing this linear stair stepping thing and then I would ring the bell and be done. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, first of all, you're so right. It is shopping. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is, shopping and it's shopping for something that will change your life. Maybe green boots change some people's life. I don't know, but this will,
For just a moment. It's very transient.
and this is, I don't want to state that, I have to be careful in saying this, but I am now in a very large sense grateful for what happened to me.
Yeah.
I'm grateful, and if I had to repeat, of course, I would not I would not put that on anybody. I would not recommend that to anybody, and I would not want to do that again if I could do it all. Of course not. However, once you go through that kind of work, you do go back and you look and you say, well, there is a very bright silver lining because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. And, interestingly, and I'm sure, Keisha, you've seen this, not all, but most of the best teachers and the most inspiring, they've gone through their own versions of these things I've seen. And again, now being on the other side of the chair here and interviewing so many people myself, I'm like, wow, it's amazing. Yeah, and I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. I wish it didn't have to be that way. But when you find the light after all of that, you really can shine bright, for yourself, for others, from all that. So, I mean, in one sense, I truly have gratitude. Not that it happened, but that it happened, and I found a way past that, and to be able to take the light from that and just try to help others whatever way I can.
Yeah.
You said that women have been a really impactful presence in your life. And would you mind sharing a little bit about the role that they've played in your healing?
I mean,
Oh,
we're a
absolutely.
father-daughter team here,
Yeah.
so this is
Right.
kind of hits home, right?
Mhm.
Well, yeah. Well, um, I'm so real quick. I'm the founder of the Art of Anti-Aging, and I know right now there's a movement against anti-aging, but that's never meant in that sense. And this spills over into that
For sure.
category. What it means is against the widespread perception that aging equals doom.
Mhm.
That's the anti that, in the name. And that is pertinent to my answer to you. So again,
Mhm.
it really, there were a handful of things I most attribute to keeping me alive, Frank. I had some pretty dark depression and anxiety, in that first half of my life that I've talked about. And I don't, e- I'm not sure I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for certain powerful women. Certainly my mother, certainly my sister, certainly some teachers who were just amazing, and certain friends. Um, and they were women. And they were women. And today I, have a wonderful and very strong, powerful wife, and I'm not sure how else to describe it, but most of all, the lesson was resilience and valuing myself at a time where I had very little, uh, value in myself, and just going above and beyond to show that. We can get into all kind of gender discussions here, but a lot of men in historical society have been patterned to be tough, to act tough, to kind of, I'm super summarizing here, but to kind of ignore the emotions and power forward and all that. And I think if I had been guided by that type of mentality, I wouldn't be here today. I'd be done. I lost friends in the city who were like that. In my case, it was more so, you know, the strength of opening yourself, of becoming vulnerable to others and yourself, of, opening those doors into, the emotions are not something to ignore. There's something to pay some strong attention to.
Mhm.
And that is, I the word empath, comes up, empathetic. And if I have a single gift, and if I have a single gift, that is my only gift, is being highly empathetic, sometimes to a fault, to be honest about it, but very empathetic. I received empathy, um, not just from a wonderful mother and a sister, but from, again, certain teachers. Miss McCabe was saying, uh, who were very empathetic, who felt me at a deeper level and just cared enough to carry me past all that. And this is a gift that, was given to me as well. So that when, I'm sending out even an email, hundreds of thousands of people, I really feel, like this, there's real human beings on the end with
Yeah.
problems, and I never, even despite I can't lose the feel of that. But this was gifted to me by powerful women. So if you want, I mean, I'll continue with the very brief version of how, came to that too, where I am today in the, humbly I say this, the wonderful position I'm in today to be able to help so many people. Well, I'll give you that real brief story is that, because this has a lot to do with, things like mindset and everything we're discussing here. So I had, as I noted to you, saw what I'll call the darker side of the medical establishment. And then, as a young man out of school, very young, after going through the last half of college, as like I said, someone working full time, going to school full time, raising a kid, I needed real job. Um, and I got a job inside of pharmaceutical benefits management industry in a large corporation. I saw and heard things there that painted my mind. It wasn't just a myth or a bunch of anger that people had directed at the pharmacy, and medical industry. It's real. And I'm just going to I'll just state that somebody who was on the inside there in marketing communications, where I had access in meetings. I was a low level management, but I had access and I was in meetings with some of the top dogs, so to speak, right? And I saw and heard things there that were unbelievable, really. I'm like, wow, this is not a myth. And sometimes it was head on disgusting. Okay. What's going on there? So, I couldn't leave right away, but I left as soon as I could. Long story short, found my way into natural health and wellness, was helping behind the scenes a lot of, what ended up being very well known individuals and brands today for a long time. finally, I did become a personal growth, you know, brand for a while there myself. That was great, but I was done with that. Went back behind the scenes, helping people fighting the good fight in a more, integrative, natural health approach to things behind. That I was at a crossroads. And at the point of that crossroads, I watched as these older generations of these powerful women started to get heavily impacted by a very negative message out there. And that negative message is that aging equals being over the hill.
Mhm.
40, it's a long-standing joke. 40, you're over the hill.
Mhm.
You're doomed to suffer. You're doomed to pain. You're doomed, you're undesirable. You're incapable. And this impacts men too. Do
Don't
not
forget invisible.
yeah, invisible. I mean, there is negative impact on men as well, but it's far more fierce on women. And
Mhm.
I saw these powerful women in my own life getting impacted by this. I'm like, whoa, this is terrible because again, I had been in natural health wellness research for decades at that point already. This is not that long ago, 7 years or something. And I'm like, that does not jive with the actual story, the truth. The truth is that, when you're 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80, you're not doomed to anything. You're not doomed to a darn negative thing. It's the mentality that's dooming you. And if
Mhm.
you believe this, if you embrace this belief that you're going to start going downhill now because you hit 40, well, guess what's going to happen? You're going to go downhill. And I saw some of that even impacting these otherwise very powerful women. I'm kind of like, it's my turn. I'm bringing all of this research forward and any way I can to help in honor of these women, other people, and especially, women. And that's just, that's the founding story, I guess you'd call it, of the art of anti-aging. Uh, and that organization over there. And that's what we do over there today in these big summits we have and everything like that. Again, it's the empathy. It's always there with me. And I'm like, I have got to just make sure people know as best as I'm able, that when you hit 40 and 50 and 60 and 70 and 80, these are the best years. They ought to be the best years of your life. You're beyond a lot of nonsense. This is very refreshing to look forward to, Reagan, because you're past a lot of crap. Sorry for the bluntness that you thought was important. And you get to increasingly focus on, more and more what's really important. However, the big, dark cloud over this is this mentality that getting older means you're supposed to suffer. You're
Mhm.
supposed to have joint pain. You're supposed to have, this and that. No, you're not. You know what I mean? You're not supposed to have any of those things at all. It should be the best time of your life.
Mhm. I love that. I was just talking about that actually, about
Mhm.
the norm in our society about like you're just expected to have joint pain, you're expected to have inflammation. Anxiety is just this constant underlying feeling that so many people face that it's just normal now. Depression, same thing. Countless other diseases that are not normal. They shouldn't be considered normal. And there are actually things to prevent those from being a part of your life. This whole anti-aging thing is hitting hard. Right before we jumped on with you, actually, I was fixing my hair in the webcam, and I was looking at my skin, and I was like, "Oh, I look really pale right now." And it just it go, it's a little comment, right? It's a little comment that actually goes so much deeper. And there's so much brainwashing in our society about these beauty norms, about what is viewed as attractive. And I think, I mean, women, yes, women especially face those. Like you said, men also do. Of course, every gender does, gendered or not gendered. But that comment, of being tan is what is considered attractive, and who decided that? And so
Yeah.
I think the work that you're doing is extremely important of unpacking this. So thank you. Thank you for sharing this.
This
Yeah.
is one of the things that I've been role modeling, hopefully.
Yeah.
Hopefully. I just turned 58 and, just what you've been saying, I keep saying, "Oh my gosh, it gets better
Mhm.
and better and better." And it's so nice to be able to feel and honestly live that out and
Mhm.
through. Like, I have better energy now than I did when I was 30.
Mhm.
I have better skin than I did when I was 30. I My mind is so much more relaxed, and my resilience is so much higher.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I have so much more equanimity than I ever had when I was a younger woman. So
Mhm.
it's definitely, I've been telling my daughters, postmenopause rocks.
This,
That
this,
whole hormone roller coaster thing,
this-
cravings and all that gone. I mean, it's oh nice.
yeah, yeah. I mean, honestly, and what a message to send to younger generations, which is there's a whole lot to look forward to. It just
A
keeps getting
lot.
better and better.
Yeah.
Just the mindset is the very, the harshest thing to get past
Mm.
is that mindset, and to deflate that mindset. It's very interesting you brought up, one of my expertise areas, that I've gone really deep in is skin, you
Mm.
know, and there are essentially two sides. And on the one hand, you got age gracefully and embrace your wrinkles and all that. And the other side is, fight it and try to look 21. The truth is kind of in the middle, probably a little, certainly toward the aging gracefully. But what I mean is this: the same bad habits, the same lifestyle habits that get us in trouble, improper diets, the lack of exercise. But of course, the big one that we were talking about today, not dealing in a healthy way with trauma, these things will age you premature, age you
Yeah.
prematurely from the inside, and they age you prematurely, therefore, on the outside. That's really just, in a general sense, at least, a billboard. Uh, and so, the truth is, many people today do look considerably older than they ought to look. If someone is striving to look like they're 21 when they're 51, that's unhealthy. That's not, and
It's
unfortunately,
arrested development. And our
right.
kids
And
beat
yeah,
their
exactly.
elders.
And society, still in large perpetuates that looking 21 and that's 25, whatever it may be, is the be all and end all. Nonsense. There's nothing, I don't think anyone should feel guilty if they are 40, 50, 60, 70 with wanting to look healthier,
Mhm.
younger looking, but not really younger looking, not trying to be 21 or 31,
Right.
just trying to look as young as they ought to look. And it's the very same steps that you're going to improve your health with in other ways that will get you there. Starting with addressing, like we talked about, this incredible stress, whether it be from trauma, from things out in the world that we have too much exposure to in a way, and not enough internal, love and socialization, with one another, recognizing not our differences, but our sameness and embracing one another, even if we have different views, um, those sorts of things. It sounds cheesy, but I promise you it's true. Will give you the healthier looking skin you're looking for, working on the diet constantly and trying to always improve it
Mm.
as well, the exercise, all the usual suspects, will get you there. Feeding your skin, it's just another way of eating, by the way.
Mhm.
I think I could go really deep into that, Keisha. Your call. I think, but skin is just another way into the body, and what we put on it is food. Right? It's food.
Right.
Right.
Same thing. Eat health and avoid the junk, avoid the toxins there, just like anywhere else. But the larger point is, it's a wonderful thing to embrace that you ought to be, if you're not already, like you sound like you are, Keisha, but if you're not already feeling like this is the best time, well, here's the beautiful news. If you're 50, 60, even 70 or 80, it can be. It can
Yep.
be. And if you're new to all this, and just start making the steps, baby steps. Don't try to do it all at once. The beautiful thing about these baby steps is, whether it's forgiveness, step one, step two, step three, shopping day one, two, three, before you finally find, the right type of counselor therapist that can help you. Step one, two, three with your diet. These small little changes have big results. Number one, if you just eliminate, I don't know, any example comes to mind, sugar for, 3 days a week, excess sugar. You're
That's a
going
good
to
example.
just thank you. And you're going to notice effects. And those effects motivate you internally, and you just keep going.
Right.
Because, the last thing I'll say, and I'll silence myself for a moment here, is if you're worried about all these changes, that worry can be worse than the changes you need to make itself. My point being, if in this wonderful, series of yours, in these series that I do, I always try to stand guard on that. Listen, you're hearing a lot, folks. Don't worry about doing it all at once because that's a recipe for disaster. Just take, step by step, as you can. And the beautiful thing is those little steps have monumental impact back on you and they will make positive change. But it really does start, with I guess we'll call it mindsets, that people
Yeah.
have.
You're absolutely right. And, we're almost out of time. And one of the things I tell my patients is 25% of any solution is going to be supplements, 25% is food. And to some extent, those are the same. And then 50% is what's going on between your ears, in terms of your perceptions of yourself and your world and life,
Mhm.
and I think that a lot of people are like, well, I really like taking the supplement and I can change my diet, but I really don't want to do the other part. Your message is well received
Yeah.
and it resonates and it is part of that resilience building
Mhm.
and beauty is from the inside out. Your skin is just a reflection of what's going on internally.
Mm.
So yeah, I appreciate where you've gone with this. And we will in the show notes have how to get a hold of you and you have a skincare line. Would you like to talk about that?
So again, I mean, I sum up help if I have to super summarize that elevator speech, and is basically it's all about what you allow inside of you and what you strive to keep out. There is no perfection, but
Mhm.
the beautiful thing is you can never do more work on keeping the wrong stuff out and the right stuff in. So we've talked about toxins in an emotional mental sense, and I agree with you. Those are the worst. And those are the people are reluctant, but please don't be to try to tackle, getting the toxic experiences, I guess we'll say, right? The trauma out, working on that first and foremost. But there are plenty of physical toxins bombarding our body today.
Thousand. Yeah.
And many people are more familiar now with toxins in literal food that we put in our mouths.
Mhm.
There's advanced awareness, amongst some circles, at least within the air. But from my view, what I've seen is a lot of people are still, even those healthy otherwise eaters, are unaware or far less aware than they need to be that they are consuming whatever they put on their bodies. It's designed, all these things, all these creams and whatever it may be, they're all designed, deodorant, to penetrate.
Yeah.
That's what their job is. Some stay on the surface, but most, the molecules are small. They go into your body. They go to varying levels in your body. Many of them make it to your bloodstream and they're shot around your body. Right there, if we just backed off all the marketing and said, wait a minute, are we meant to eat synthetic things? Are we meant to eat what, in the case of skincare ingredients out there, are mostly petroleum based products? Should we be eating petroleum? No.
Or injected
Right.
with
Yes.
stuff.
Yes.
Right.
But the marketing gets us, and we're like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm going to try. We don't pay attention and turn around, not to what they're screaming on the front of the label, paraben free, but then you turn around, there's 500 other chemicals in this you don't want. Pay attention. This is food. And one thing I always say to people, if you remember nothing else from this part of what I like to talk about, please remember you're pushing a grocery cart down a cosmetics and personal care products aisle. You're pushing it down a food aisle.
Yeah.
Pay as much attention. So with that all noted, uh, there's a, I have stories for everything. They're true stories. I can go deep. I'm really short. I couldn't find. I started to get crow's feet around my eyes. I'm like, I know there's ingredients. I've seen them out there. I've researched the heck out of this. Maple leaf extracts are phenomenal for boosting elastin in the skin, and I knew some others. I'm like, so I'm going to go find an organic product that contains it. I couldn't find it. That's the real short version. So I'm like, well, I'm going to have it created then because I know it's going to work. Well, I had it created. My wife also had crow's feet. It worked like gangbusters for us. I'm like, well, it's almost a disservice not to offer this.
Yeah.
Dirty Woods is the name of the company. That's how it was born. And, the rest is kind of history. It's only been about, I think, 3 years here. But that very first product is called the Age Defying Dream Cream. It contains maple leaf extracts, and I could geek out on this, but I won't. But they're outstanding for boosting your elastin. It contains some nature's most potent vitamin C and other antioxidant boosting ingredients, which help the collagen side of the equation. And then there's, your moisturizers, and Anyway, the long and the short is it's all USDA certified organic, not easy to do. But I bring that up because please don't listen. I don't care. I mean, I do care. I'd love you to try the products, but even if you don't, wherever you go looking for anything, especially if it's going directly on your skin, another beautiful thing about living in today's world is that increasingly there are USDA certified cosmetics and personal care products out there. Deodorant, huge one. Please try to go clean on that. Please try to go clean. So our products work, they're feeding your skin some really great ingredients that help, and it's non-toxic.
Mhm.
And you can be sure it's non-toxic because it's USDA certified, which is an independent certification. We have to jump through hoops. This is one thing the government actually, in this little, does pretty darn well. They make you jump through hoops to prove that. So not only can it not have, synthetic toxic ingredients, but even the ingredients in there are organic, free of chemicals. They're raised, in other words, without pesticides and herbicides. So it's truly clean, not just because we're screaming it in the marketing sense, because we go through that process and they have outstanding ingredients. So whether it's a company like ours or any out there, in any other realm that's really putting it in there to try to keep those toxins out of your body, I would just ask people to patronize those companies because they're fighting the good fight out there.
Thank you so
Thank you
much
so
for the work you're
much.
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really important because, I mean, just as a final note to everyone, think about like you can get estrogen through a patch. You can have scopolamine for your motion sickness through a patch. Of course, the off bug spray that you spray on yourself is going into your bloodstream. I mean, you can't have one thing that you put on you get absorbed and the other thing doesn't.
Right.
So it's like you're putting it in your mouth when you put it on your skin. So
Yeah.
this is fantastic what you're doing. And I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing
Yeah.
your wisdom with us.
Thank
Oh,
you
it's
so much.
wonderful conversation. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
All right, everyone. Again, you can get a hold of Brian Vaszily through the show notes connection that we have here. And until next time, be well.